Welcome to Soundbreaker. In today's episode, we're talking to John Franck, who is the founder and CEO of UNDRCVR Entertainment. John, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. And for our listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you please give us a bit of introduction about yourself, before we really dive into it? I'm sure it's going to be extremely insightful and intriguing.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here.
My pleasure.
Quick word about me. I've been on the music side of the entertainment business for the better part of 2.5 decades, playing a number of different roles at different labels and different entities, everything from, marketing, radio promotion, biz dev, label services, digital sales, kind of the whole gamut of those things. And now I have my own agency called UNDRCVR Entertainment, which is a 3-part vertical. It's an artist management company, a marketing services company, and a media buying company as well.
Amazing. You said something. You said you were involved in radio promotion. And back in the day, radio promoters, they were like royalty in the music business. Literally royalties. Interesting. I'm sure you got some interesting stories to tell about that. Yes. John, I always ask my guests before we dive into it, I say, hey, what really got you into that path of your journey into the music business? Were you influenced by your parents, or where you lived, where you were born, or a friend, or just you were part of a band, or just natural love being in the music business or love for music?
Great question. So I can trace the very moment in time where I became interested in the music business and music in general without knowing anything about how it worked.
Yes.
The day Elvis Presley died was the day this started me on my journey, and I had no idea who Elvis was. But I do remember my mom was very, very upset the day that he died. And my mom spent many times in the arts. She was a choreographer and a ballerina. She also worked with Marcel Marceau for a few years. My dad was a biochemist. I'm not really sure how that all kind of came together, but somehow it did. And Elvis dying was kind of the beginning and catalyst for me being interested in everything related to music, which then led to, a band called Kiss, which became a kind of a lifelong passion. And later on, as a marketer, I think they were the greatest marketing idea that's ever existed in rock music, but that's an aside. And then it led me to see my first shows, which were, I can clearly remember what they were. They were Paul Simon, followed by Stevie Wonder, and then a show that changed my life, a band from Boston called the Jay Giles Band. And I went to see the Jay Giles Band kind of at the height of their fame, which was on the Freeze Frame tour. Mm-hmm. And I had never seen anything quite like it. And their front man, a gentleman named Peter Wolf, was kind of from like another planet. And the whole thing was just so completely transcending to me that was kind of the moment where like I have to somehow be a part of this. I have no idea how or what it even means, but that band and that show changed my life. And then many years later, I got a chance to tell Peter this, which was also kind of a very kind of surreal moment. And yeah, that's kind of like what set me on my journey.
Interesting. John, you were working or started working at E1, and E1, one of the leading companies out there. They're involved in music, they're involved in TV, especially they had quite a few hit shows, I think, on HBO, if I'm not mistaken. And how was that experience? And how did that set your path and kind of more into the music business?
So it's funny. So prior to E1, I had a couple of quick sidebars that led me to E1. And going back to the radio promotion aspect of what you'd mentioned, Bob. So my very first job in the record business was actually working at Elektra, pretty close out of college. And, great life lesson. I walked into Elektra, a gentleman named Jeff Jones hired me as one of like the legendary marketing people in the record business. He'd worked with Bob Dylan and The Clash, and I just couldn't even believe I was coming to work every day and going through CD cabinets that had The Cure, The Doors, Metallica, Motley, Anthrax. It was mind blowing to me. And he used to call me to his office, and he would dictate marketing plans to me, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. But as these things happen in the record business, the company got merged with East West, and I came in one day and we all got laid off. So that was my kind of my
It's
first.
funny. A lot of the, not to interrupt you, a lot of the people I interview on the show, a lot
Mhm.
of them started at Electra, whether
Yeah.
they started as an intern or their
Mhm.
first job.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Why is
Yep.
that? Everybody went to Electra in the
You
beginning.
know, I don't really know. It's funny. I was throughout college. I was a music writer, and when I interviewed with Jeff, he wanted to know if I was able to write, which is a great question for any head of marketing, because if you're constantly writing, you're writing marketing plans,
Yes.
one sheets, and updates, and all the kind of stuff. And I had a whole dossier of writing that I brought in with him, and I actually one of the things I had in there was a review of a recent Clash box set. And I think one of the reasons he hired me was because he's like, yeah, you write pretty well, and I think you can be helpful. So I ended up getting that job. I get laid off, and then I get a job as a temp at Sony, which
Mm,
then led to becoming an assistant to a product manager named Randy Irwin, who at the time was at a company called 550.
yeah.
That company at the time was being run by a woman named Polly Anthony, legendary executive who sadly passed away. But the roster at the time was kind of incredible because Celine Dion was signed to the roster, and she was at that moment the biggest artist on the planet. Randy was a marketing person, and I worked for Randy. And I just came in every day trying to learn and absorb kind of anything I could wrap my head around. Again, without understanding how any of it connected. Really, just kind of paying attention to paying attention to marketing concepts, but also paying attention to how people spoke to one another, how people were managed, kind of the bigger picture of like, how does this all kind of work? And that led me to a year and a half of working for Joel Clayman as a radio promotion assistant, who at the time was the head of alternative radio for 550, which was a completely different gig.
Hmm.
And, to your point earlier, Bob, radio ruled everything around it at the time. And that was a job where, like, you would be at your desk from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at night. You needed permission to go to the bathroom. You knew the name of every PD and MD at alternative rock and AAA and all that kind of stuff. And it was an entire different part of the business that at the time was massively important to the development of any artist. And I learned quite a bit from him. And at the time, the record business was set up where there were like all these branches that you could go to, because
Hmm.
business was drunk on physical, right? Like, we thought the physical years would never end, and these labels were making money hand over fist and were overstaffed. So there came a point in time where Joel's like, do you want to be a radio promotion a guy? And I said, no, I have absolutely no interest in that whatsoever. I was the guy in college that read liner notes in records, and then go out and do keg stands and give up, and that's what radio promotion people did. Again, not knowing anything, just making big generalizations. So I decided not to do that, and an opportunity came up with a company called Koch Records that
Oh
was
yeah.
part of Koch Distribution, and this was
Hmm.
in early 2000.
Yeah.
I interviewed for the head of sales, a gentleman named Bob Tildesley, lovely guy. And that was my first real kind of marketing gig. And in that job, and this is before the company got bought and sold, and things happened. So this was the early 2000s. And we had signed a band called Stabbing Westward that was previously on Columbia. They were my first big project, so to speak, as a product manager. And then one day, a gentleman named Alan Grumblatt, who's been a dear friend for many, many years, who was leading the urban part of the company, came to me and said, I have a little imprint called In the Paint, and I'm going to sign RZA. And I
Mm.
said, wow, RZA from Wu-Tang. I said, amazing. He goes, and you're going to be the marketing guy. And I said, that's great, except I don't know the first thing about how to market hip hop. And he said, don't worry, I'll teach you. And that kind of set me on my journey of learning how to be a hip hop marketer,
Yes.
which then set me on a different path, which taught me how to be a video commissioner, because we had no video commissioners in the building. So then I became the video commissioner and the marketing guy. And then we had a sales guy at Frank, no relation to me. And then as digital was starting to kind of become a thing, I became the digital guy for that. And all of a sudden I have three jobs. But the wonderful thing about being in those environments is that it teaches you to have to learn different things. There's no I can't figure it out. There's no layers of people to rely on. You end up being the layer with a small group of people.
Yeah.
And in terms of an education process, it was unbelievable for us. We had a small team of people that I'm still very, very close to. And then all of a sudden, we realized that we needed a bigger fish in the building, which then led us to
Hmm.
be in business with Suge Knight. And we had all of a sudden Death Row was in the building, and all of a sudden we are manufacturing and shipping thousands of Death Row reissues, and I'm dealing with all that and dealing with Suge and all the kind of things that you would imagine come with that.
Yeah.
Then we did a deal with Master P, and then
Wow.
Dipset showed up, and DJ Khaled showed up, and then all of a sudden we had
Yeah,
momentum.
everybody.
We had momentum on the hip hop side. We're like
Yeah.
in between 2005 and 2007, we had really great years, and we had a lot of success. And ringtones were happening, and 1 week we sold 400,000 tracks and ringtones, and it was like holy. And all the while I was, the quote unquote head of marketing, I was commissioning videos, and now I was also pitching the videos to MTV and dealing with all that. So now I have four jobs, right?
Hmm.
Without having the actual job description. It was just what you did, right? And so the small core team of us that worked together at the time, worked very, very closely with DJ Khaled 1.0. We had
Hmm.
BG and Cash Money. We had Jim Jones and Dipset, and all these things took up an inordinate amount of time, but they also kept the lights on. So it was a
Oh
very
yeah.
exciting time for us. And it was a deep, deep education in understanding how all the parts in hip hop connect, from clearances, producer agreements, sitting in BA meetings,
Hmm.
understanding how to put together, crews for video production, because at the time we were making cheap videos when people were making 200,000. So all these things were kind of part of the education process, and I loved it. It was amazing. I had 10 years of that with
Wow.
that team, and you're at the very end of that. The company got purchased by Entertainment One, and the company became
So that's where you.
Yep.
Yes.
And then
Got
it
it.
became
Got it.
E1. And when it became E1, I wasn't sure what was going to happen to the label, in kind of an age of consolidation. And I had young children and all that. And I got an opportunity to go to Razor and Tie, and I took it. And that company was a very different company. And that company did extraordinarily well in the children's business, the direct response business.
Hmm.
And my job there was again being a head of marketing, but also being involved in biz dev and doing things that were definitely different from my job description at E1 slash Koch slash now Monarch.
Mm.
And it was interesting because I spent a lot of my time looking to sign things when I was there. Our head of A&R and I, together signed 17 or 18 acts to the label, including the Pretty
Wow.
Reckless,
Were you at Resident Tie?
Razor and Tie, including the Sword, Pretty Reckless, re-signed Hatebreed, the Razor and
Hmm.
Tie, who had previously been, with us at Koch. And it was an interesting couple of years. That company was getting ready to be sold, and I did not know that. And they decided to make a shift and a thinning of the herd. I got
Hmm.
thinned in that herd, and right as that was happening, 300 was being born, and our head of A&R from Razor and Tie, Pete Jaberga, who now runs
Hmm.
AWOL, is the president of AWOL, was getting courted by them. We had been, Koch had been friendly competitors to Asylum that Todd Moskowitz ran for quite some time.
Hmm.
And Todd asked Pete if I still knew how to do hip hop. And I'm like, you never forget. And we went over together to 300. And that was at the very, very day one infancy of the company, when the
Hmm.
company, I think, literally had, I think, 7 employees in addition to the founders of the company.
Hmm.
And that was a completely different experience, because that was a full on startup structure, um, with no structure. you know, and I'll
Uh,
pause there for a second, because I realize I've just been kind of
no,
talking.
no. I mean, pretty interesting. I like, actually, you've not saved me the questions, but obviously, you just went through it and really pretty interesting. And then from 300, you went to ADA.
Yeah,
You
I
were the
mean,
head of marketing, or
so it's interesting. I spent 5.5 years at 300, which was, that could be a whole episode on its own. You
hmm
know, the skills I learned there were also very, very different, right? Because there were things that, again, what prepared me for that gig initially, what were my years at Koch, not so much
hmm
Razor High, because now we're in a situation where Atlantic is our distribution partner. It's some wonderful people there, and we have to do all those things that we did at Koch in the mid 2000s. We had to clear samples. We had to figure out how to put things into production. We had to figure out how to put things into manufacturing. We had no staff. And so it's hard to explain to people, at the time when FediWap broke, we had marketing meetings with 8 people. It wasn't like there were all these kind of people around doing things. It was a skeletal company, and so having to do a number of different things across that business and across different verticals was incredibly challenging, incredibly rewarding, and also, I would say, trying to find the third word for it, incredibly disruptive and confusing at times, because we weren't really sure sometimes where the responsibility lied, because we were such a small company, which then eventually grew. And, by the time I left 300, we had 50 plus employees, maybe even more than that. But I left 300 in December 2018, took a little bit of time off. And then somebody introduced me to a gentleman named Elias Seaton, who I didn't know, who at the time was running ADA and later left to run SoundCloud, where he still is. And I was fully prepared to take another gig that was a full-on hip hop gig, and I was at the very end of that kind of contract negotiation. And one of these kind of like aha moments in my life, I met Elia, and within an hour, I wanted to go work for him, which had
wow.
never happened before in my career. I felt that, again, in the learning journey, I could learn things that I didn't know. Brilliant M&A guy, incredibly empathetic person, great energy, and I'm like, I want to go learn things that I don't know. I want to see what distribution is like. And he hired me to be the head of digital commerce at ADA, but he wanted my marketing know-how to kind of help our labels as well, which I spent quite a deal of time working on. And along with that, at some point there was another corporate shift, and I became the head of label services. And again, completely different gig, because we had to thin the herd. There was a lot of artists signed within that structure that unfortunately we had to let go. And as I was getting to the tail end of that, in the middle of COVID and all these things kind of happening, there was a change in leadership. Elia left to go run SoundCloud, and I was out. So that's kind of how these things happen. And from that time on, I decided, like, now's my opportunity to kind of do my own thing, and that's what we've been doing ever since.
That's where Undercover came to life.
Yep.
Your journey is pretty fascinating. Literally, you could give master classes and teach people of being in the music business. Do you feel now a lot of the younger generation, which is nothing wrong with it, but they say, you know what, I don't have to do what he does. Technology is involved. I have the talent. And you went through everything. Literally, when I say you could give a master class, you've been through, you kind of earned the fundamentals of the music business. Marketing is a big part of it. Sure, the relationships that you developed and all, but just understanding the real fundamental of the music business. Do you feel like a lot of the younger people who come into it, they really don't care? They don't want to understand it. They don't want to go through the routes that you went through, from promotion to marketing to sales to everything?
No, I don't feel that way. Actually, I feel like I love young energy, and I love the ability to teach people things. Right? I think technology has so radically changed
Yes.
everything about how music is discovered and consumed and ingested, like every part of it. Right? I remember when I lived in Brooklyn, we had we had a lovely couple that lived in our building that were in publishing. And one day, Diane was her name, says, there's a thing called YouTube. And this is how YouTube works. And I kept asking her, so wait a second, I can make a video and upload it now. She's like, yes, you can literally, we can make a video in this corner and you can put it up on YouTube, right? I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I remember walking into the marketing meeting the next day, said, there's this thing called YouTube, where eventually, and sort of like when you see the future, I'm like, it's going to replace MTV and BET. And people looked at me like I was insane, right? And I'm like,
It replaced TV, literally to replace
it's going
TV.
to replace TV. But again, not knowing anything, I'm just saying these things and uttering them out loud. And that was kind of a massive shift in how things are being discovered and consumed that like snowballed and happened very quickly. But
Yeah.
it's funny because when you talk about technology and kind of paying your dues and the whole thing, every part of the business, whether it's making videos or recording or how things are sold, has so radically changed in the last 15 years. If you think about these places like Facebook and MySpace and even going back to like all those things, it's still relatively new technology, even though we take it for granted that it's been around forever.
Correct.
And this is how people communicate, right? I remember, after shooting videos for years and years on film, where you would burn thousands of feet of film. I remember moving into like a digital realm, and then one day, I'm at a video shoot and someone's holding a 5D camera. And that's the camera. And I'm like, what are you doing with the 5D camera? Like, we're going to shoot the whole video with a 5D camera. And I'm looking at the director like he's insane, right? And again, all these shifts in technology are in a way the best and worst thing to ever happen to creativity, not the record business, creativity, which is a huge part of marketing. So all of a sudden, anybody can do it, and anybody can make content. And now we are head deep in a short content world where everything is consumed, discovered, shared in little tiny bits of short content. Call it snackable content, whatever you want to call it, right? It's led us down to this path. So I think for the younger generation who is born with a phone in their hand, all these things to them are completely native. They know everything there is to know about how all these platforms move, where to find music, how to share music, discover it, what short content works, what is transactional, what is non-transactional. And that's an amazing, amazing thing. And I want to learn from them things that I don't know. And you have to be, as kind of the adult in the room, you have to be intellectually curious where you ask questions. How does this work? I don't pretend to know what I don't know. And I'm very open about those things, right? If I don't know is actually an answer. So I tell younger people all the time, you don't know something, ask the question. Now, where there's a learning curve for younger people is understanding outside of those very specific things, how the rest of the machinery works, right? How are records made? What's the difference between records that sound good sonically and what a record is that's competitive? What goes into making a record? How does the BA aspect of it work? What is the value of press? What's the value of radio? When are those things, like all those things that are kind of the panoramic 101s of marketing are things that to the younger generation are foreign to them. And this is not a slight. They just weren't born into it. If you are 22 years old, you do not listen to the radio. You don't. You have no interest in listening to the radio.
No.
And it's one of the reasons why you hear these places struggle with trying to reach a younger audience, because younger audiences are not listening to radio, right? So these things that 10 years ago were completely needed to do things have shifted into a layer, and they've become destinations as opposed to a point of entry. So to answer your question, Bob, about, how do I feel about the younger generation and them paying their dues? I think it's not so much the dues are always a part of it. And I believe in hard work and people kind of putting in the time and grind to learn things. But I also think they're at a distinct disadvantage because they weren't able to just kind of learn these things by osmosis the way the older generation was, because you had to be around it. So part
And the
of
business changed. Sure. And the
the
business
business has
changed.
radically changed,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so there was a very linchpin tipping point in the business, and I remember it very clearly because 300 was what got swept up in it. Right, this was the beginning of 2015, which is now 9 years ago. And 9 years ago, Fetty Wap and Trap Queen was on the cusp of streaming catching in America for the first time. Right, there was The Weeknd, there was 21 Pilots, and there was Fetty Wap. Those three
Hmm.
artists, I believe, ushered in that new moment where streaming became the holy shit, this is going to work. Not quite sure how
Yes.
it's going to work, but it's going to work, right?
Yeah.
And at that moment, as a young company, we decided to shift energies into hiring more digitally minded people, right?
Hmm.
Great talented people that we hired, but again, that knew one specific skill set, but had to learn all these other skill sets that we took for granted because we were the adults in the room. And one of the great joys that I have, as an adult in the room, is helping teach those things to the younger generation and mentoring them and explaining to them how the whole engine connects. And it's not just one thing in a vacuum that's going to develop an artist. It's hundreds of things, you
I
know.
mean,
It's funny. I often use this quote that Julie Greenwald said, and this was now a few years ago, which I think this is an amazing quote. She said back in the physical years, you could do 5 to 6 things. And if you had a halfway decent song, a good manager, and, you know, a band willing to work, you could get a gold record.
right.
You could actually get a hit.
Yeah.
you know Fast forward to now, you have to do 100 things just to get noticed. And by the way, you could have the greatest record in the world.
Hmm.
None of those things are going to guarantee you that it's going to find an audience you know
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
so again, having seen all those shifts in consumption and technology over time, I think um, has made me more well-rounded, but also has made me more keener to teach those things to our teams and people that we're coming up with.
Well, tell us about Undercover, because I see all of that funneled down to your own venture, Undercover, which is really specialized in artist management
Mhm.
and AI media buying. So tell us about it. What's the vision? What's the goal? And what do you hope to accomplish with it and from it, and
Yeah,
contribute to the business as it's changing rapidly because of technology? And
yeah.
obviously, there's an era. We're going to get your opinion on what's next in the music business, but let's focus on Undercover.
So Undercover, the best way to describe us is we are a seasoned marketing department for hire. There are a number of boutique agencies that do what we do. We just do it a little bit differently. We have Within the company, we built a media buying tool that's powered by AI that we use with a lot of our different clients that takes the guessing out of media buying. We have an artist management company, and we often look at things from the point of view of the artist, which I think is very, very important because artist management at times will have a different agenda than the record label. And we know that smart smart managers run the plays, right, for their artists. Like the days of the record label running every play, are long behind us, right?
Correct.
You have to have a kind of a roadmap and a trajectory in your mind. And being an artist manager requires all the skill sets I've been talking about for the last 30 plus minutes, where you actually have to know all these things, right? You actually have to know, how does sound exchange work? How do you get on a tour? How do you put together a tour support budget? How do you reach out to a side artist? How do you clear them? How do you commission a video? So the the role of the artist management is sort of marketing on steroids, right?
Yeah.
So all these things kind of come together and coalesce in one role. And then we have a traditional marketing agency where we're able to help artists and managers with pretty much every part of the business, with the exception of radio promotion, where we hire out, or publicity. And again, publicity, I think, has radically changed in these last few years. And depending on the needs of the artist, some artists that are more traditional and older might need publicity. Some might just need customizable programs that we work on with the publicist. And we're here to, to put all these things together and craft them for our clients. And we have a pretty wild kind of whiplash roster of genres, everything from pop to Americana to metal to hip hop and kind of everything in between. And it's been incredibly fun and also incredibly challenging because, you're like a distribution company, you're out there selling your wares.
Yes.
And the thing that we love about what we do is we've been really fortunate. We've worked with a lot of amazing people and people that we love working with. And when we started the company, one of the first things I did was, I made a list of all the people in business that I really like and all the artists and people that I've bumped into over the years. And I just started calling them and saying, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm available to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how this all started, and to this day, we, like any business, you've got clients that are more difficult than others. It's expected.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, knock on wood, we've had amazing partnerships with people. And there's always going to be some point where there's a little bit of friction or misunderstanding or things that we don't align on. And it's perfectly okay. It's perfectly okay.
So, I mean, this is a trend, or I've just been seeing it happening. Auto service companies like yourself really are the new kind of hot independent and kind of mid-sized record labels, because nobody wants to sign to a record label anymore. Everybody would rather come to companies like yourself where you do artist services. Even the word label service is kind of disappearing. So the new thing is artist service. As you said, management becoming the key role right now that every artist wants instead of a record label. And that's something that you guys are offering, which is the management services.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, the thing is, Bob, and I'll say this, for your audience, I'm allergic to the word services.
Yes.
And anybody that I'm friends with laughs about this, because when I hear services, I think of like a Meineke or a tire repair shop.
Okay. What would you educate us, enlighten us, please?
We are a marketing partnership a marketing partnership company. Okay. A marketing partnership can entail a million different things. When I hear the word services, and when I look at what some distribution companies offer as quote unquote services, which are very, and no offense to any of these companies, are very related and they're very specific and rigid. We do things as marketing partners that have nothing to do with services. We are connecting artists to producers, mixers, mastering engineers, clearing things. There's some artists, we're getting them shows, we're getting them tours. That has nothing to do with label services. Label services will be like, here's a marketing timeline, here's a marketing plan, here's some activations, here are the 20 people we can call on your behalf to do things for you, right? And it's not me picking on them. It's that we get underneath the car and open up the parts and see how they're connected, right? And that's fun about the gig, right? And we tell people all the time, we can do this basics for you, or we can really kind of help you on a broader level. And by the way, we have our own distribution lane, which I didn't even mention. We can put out records on your behalf. We put out the Last Thursday single, band that we love. We put it out for them through our distribution pipeline. We pitch them to DSPs. We help them with some kind of entry-level marketing.
You guys have your own direct deals, or you go an aggregation deal?
We have an aggregation deal, which again is really here.
It makes it easier. You don't want to deal with the.
I need to get this out. I'm confused by this TuneCore. And I'm like, great, we'll put it out for you. No problem.
Amazing.
Right? Amazing. So we're, again, part of being a partnership and a partner is being able to offer all those things under one roof. And when you need media buying, we will help you. If and when you need influencer marketing, we know who to direct you to. We can do all these things, and we love it. And at the end of the day, we are very, very mindful of spending a client's money as if it were our money, right? And again, coming from the point of view of being artist managers, we look at it the same way. Do we need to spend an extra $10,000 on a video that's going to get the same number of views if I spend $2,000, right? Like we look at those things, and we carefully explain to each one of our partners why those things are the way they are, and we back it up with data. right? So they can
Amazing.
understand if you spend X, you need to generate Y to have a tangible ROI, And again, some clients listen, some do not, but
Something.
mostly they listen when you lay it out for them and explain to them the dollars and cents of their business. And again, that's a partnership. That is not a services minded company. And sorry to kind of like harp on this, Bob. I just
No, hey,
feel,
listen, this is all about you, about
yeah,
Undercover, and
yeah,
about John Frank. Yeah.
I'm
John,
just,
what's next? No, before we wrap it up, two questions. What's next on the horizon for Undercover for 20? We're almost in the end of 2024 or 25 coming up. What's next?
so we've got some exciting partnerships, a
Yes.
couple that I can't divulge, and maybe we will at some point,
Yes.
that we're really, really excited about. One of our clients, All That Remains, is going to put out their first, fully independent album next year. My partner Eddie Levy manages them. We just did, 30 plus shows with Megadeth throughout the summer,
Congrats. Amazing.
which was great. And again, we're doing it, we are the label with the band. And so there's literally 4 people working on their project versus 20. So again, the marketing partnerships part of our business and the management part are completely in sync with that. So that's been a lot of fun. We have a developing artist out of Nashville that you'll hear about next year, who's kind of in the Hardy, Morgan Wallen, Jelly Roll lane. It's got incredible music coming out that we'll be able to tell you guys more about next year. And then, in terms of what happens next in the business, I think, making a broad statement, people in the last few years got drunk on playlisting, got drunk on all these different things that kind of did the work for them. I think there is a return to artist development, which, people are talking about. It's an impossible thing to break artists. It's so hard, right?
Yes.
In a business where the failure rate is stratospheric, right? Which we all know, most things fail, and there's going to be a return. Well, not a return because it's never went away. Artists need to play shows. I can't overemphasize this enough. If you have the ability to play live, unless you are a bedroom artist, you have to figure out a way to play shows in your area, in your backyard, right? It's something that we
Oh, there's a lot of bars, a lot of small venues.
yeah,
Would love to have that. Yes, a lot
yeah,
of amazing. Good advice, though, really.
yeah.
So, what are you saying? Get out there, interact, build your audience, build your fan base, and gain that momentum that a lot of the big bands that that you were working on back in the day, you promoted, you were involved in that. They always were
100%.
out there. Always. Yes. Yes.
There's also, and we hear a lot about this now from the majors, the super fan, right? So
Yes.
the super fan has been here for the better part of 2 decades, except instead of calling it the super fan, it was called D2C, right? The D2C experience and all the things that come with it,
Yeah.
along with VIP paid meet and greets and all these different kind of adjuncts that come with there being a super fan, have been here all along, right? And so with the erosion of the traditional physical retailers, which has been gone for years and years, the Best Buys and the music
Yes.
halls and all that kind of stuff,
All of that. Yes.
you know, and any underground artist that had to survive has been tapping into these things for years and years. Now, all of a sudden, this becomes a buzzword with the major labels and major entities because they need to find another point on their P&L to wow shareholders with. So all of a sudden, super fans becomes this new thing, which, by the way, is a wonderful thing because you can give people different versions of what they can't get anywhere else. And if you
Correct.
are a fan, you will buy those things. And as a person that still buys stuff from my favorite artists in the world, I love it.
Amazing.
I think it's a great thing. But you're going to hear a lot about that in the coming year, and you're going to hear a lot about you know major labels being accountable to their shareholders and trying to prove how well this is working, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's an app, a case study, whatever those things may be. And then the last thing I will say, another Captain Obvious thing to kind of close the circle on this, the intrinsic value of great catalog is only going to increase. And I'm not talking simply about acquiring it.
Well, we do see it. We do see it because there's a lot of catalogs being exchanged right now.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about. Big
Yeah, yeah.
money. We've been seeing some of the deals that have been going down, some of the, acquisitions. Amazing. It's
Yeah.
like mind
And
blowing.
listen, those things are kind of mind blowing in dollars and cents and all those things. But I think 99% of the world is not that. Even if they are,
Yes.
selling fractionalized pieces of publishing or master
Yeah.
rights or whatever it might be, the importance of catalog for keeping the lights on and for music fandom is only going to increase, right? And I think there's
Yes.
going to be a continued focus on those things by labels where, investing in those things and investing in the marketing of catalog
Hmm.
in a way that, I would say 5 years ago didn't exist. There's going to be way more attention paid to that, and there needs to be, because in a TikTok age, anything can break overnight and become a thing which, a month ago didn't exist, right? So I think those three things are part of, I think, of what's next, maybe for next year.
Well, we're
And then,
looking. We're waiting.
yeah, we'll see.
Yes.
But yeah.
Quick advice for the upcoming entrepreneurs who are carving their path into the music business. Quick
Mm,
advice from somebody who really, I would say, his advice will be extremely valued and listened to on
sure.
Soundbreaker. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a young individual coming up in the business, don't be fixated on what you think you want to do. Number one, pardon me, take any opportunity that comes your way and become a chameleon and learn as many different things as you can until you settle into something that you're truly passionate about. Be open, not rigid, be vulnerable, and ask questions. And the other thing that I would also say, and this is really, really important, is watch the behavior of the executives that you are around. Even if you have an entry level internship at a company,
So learn.
take a look around at how people communicate with each other. What are they doing right? What do you find kind of jarring? What do you find offensive? And take all those things into like a brain salad and put them away. Because at some point, when you get put into like some kind of managerial capacity, it will become your turn to manage people. And managing people is incredibly difficult. Anybody can be really good at their job and doing things.
Yeah.
Managing people and empowering them is really, really hard. And as a young person in the business, I can't overemphasize that enough. Have your antennas up and look around. Take a good look around and find one of those people that you can learn from. Make yourself indispensable and try to figure out a way to get in their orbit, which might mean, after you've been there for a little while, try to get into a marketing meeting, learn things, and just sit and listen.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great advice. You heard it first on Soundbreaker. John Franco. I just want to say thank you for joining us today. And this
Pleasure.
concludes today's episode of Soundbreaker. Please follow us on socials and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you and appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks so much, Bob.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the Soundbreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.